Why do some fictional worlds feel chillingly real, even with demons and dragons? It's often because they portray a different, more subtle kind of monster. Prejudice. In D&D or any other TTRPG, role-playing the cartoonish villain is easy. Low-key cruelty and bigotry, the elf-hating dwarf, the xenophobic shopkeeper, those need a closer look. My name's Rich, this is Renegade Rolls, and this is a topic which is nuanced. Prejudice in the real world is a bad thing. Including prejudice in your games can be a good thing. You can tell stories which are more subtle, more satisfying to resolve, and may just resonate long after the dice have stopped rolling. Today we're going to look at the big questions around role-playing prejudice in TTRPGs. I'll show you how, as DM in D&D or GM in any other system, you can bring prejudiced groups or individuals to life in a way that doesn't feel icky. I've also got a toolkit to help you introduce this topic at your table, and a guide on how you can play prejudiced characters as a player and GM with sensitivity and respect for everyone. A couple of fundamentals. I'm defining prejudice as an irrational suspicion or hatred of a particular social group. In our world, that's often people of different races or the adherents of a religion. For the sake of not using a single word so often it loses all meaning after a while, I'm going to use it interchangeably with the word bigotry. It's not quite a synonym, but close. Bigotry is actually a stronger form of the word prejudice, but for this video, when you hear me use one, it can just as easily be interpreted as the other. Also, for the avoidance of any doubt, prejudice and bigotry in the real world are bad things. You can totally bring prejudiced characters to your games of D&D or any TTRPG. If you're an experienced player or GM, I bet you've already tried it before. I really hope it's gone well for you. I hope that you've navigated the separation between real person and your character. I hope that you found the right path away from casual cruelty and towards a more nuanced, believable position. I hope your characters have grown, that they've changed and evolved as the story has unfolded, because if we get this wrong, things can go bad fast. If we've offended someone, saying, "Oh, I was only playing," is not going to cut it. What we need is a framework on how to present prejudice in a sensitive way. This is a full summary of what I'll be talking about. Pause here, screenshot if you like. Today is not the day for sneaky retention editing. There are also timestamped chapters in the description to help you navigate. But Rich, who are you to be lecturing everyone about prejudice? Well, excellent question, oh hopefully hypothetical person in the comment section. Through no skill of my own, I am a straight white male in my 30s living in Scotland, a country which has a majority of white people. This means that my experience of prejudice is on the whole indirect. I've heard stories from friends, I've read books and consumed media about other people's lives, which I'm then able to take in and find empathy with them. If being on the receiving end of prejudice is also outside of your lived experience, congratulations, you win yet another prize. But it's also on you to learn about people's lives outside of your own community and to do the work to make sure that your words and actions, whether intentional or not, avoid harming others. For anyone new to my channel, I focus on the roleplay and narrative aspects of D&D and other TTRPGs. Videos about optimization, min-maxing, latest character builds, or the latest discourse, they're just not for me. I make Dungeon Master or Game Master advice videos like this one, as well as occasional reviews of lesser known games. I've also got a channel where I run actual play games in D&D and lots of other systems, alongside some amazing improvisers. Over there you can see me put my money where my mouth is, my GM tips in action. Let's start with the big questions. Should players play prejudiced characters? Yes, if everyone around the table agrees. What you do at your tables is not for anyone to police. At my tables, I allow prejudiced characters on the condition that it's not their entire personality, and that the player is open to them growing and learning as the campaign progresses. I'd also allow a player character to become prejudiced due to events that take place during the game. Maybe we have a human fighter come home to the edge of the forest to find their village ablaze. All they're able to find out is that it was destroyed by elves. That character might become prejudiced against all elves, and that's not a great response, but we can understand the motivation behind it. Then in the next few sessions, the character would likely behave very negatively towards any elves, regardless of whether they were the ones responsible or not. What I'd want to see from a player in that case would be for them to look for ways to confront that prejudice in the character. Maybe as the game progresses, they find out that it was a certain band of elves that did the horrible deed, and that most elves live peaceful lives. I'd be looking for the player character to realise their viewpoint wasn't reasonable. When this new information came to light, I wouldn't feel great about the player insisting the character says things like, well, I just hate them, I always will. That's where at my table I'd be drawing the line and looking to make a change. In this scenario, I'd make a point directly after the first session it came up to check in with the player and the rest of the group to make sure they were okay with the direction this was likely to take. Is everyone okay with interspecies prejudice? If not, we can always change things to suit everyone's preferences. Maybe it wasn't elves after all. We could retcon and say it was a band of humans instead, the same species as our player character. More on retconning and when to do it later. Should GMs play prejudiced characters? Yes. Again, if everyone around the table agrees. All tables are different, but when I'm running my games, I want those characters to be fought against and challenged by the players during the course of the campaign. That bigoted city guard, I want my players to ruin her day. The xenophobic tavern keeper, hells yeah, I want my players to unleash the rats in the basement all over his bar and drive away his customers. I personally don't want to run or play in games where prejudice isn't challenged, and hopefully eventually overcome. Games which are hopeless, games where the world is utterly bleak, just aren't my idea of fun. Even Morkborg, just there, gives some hope that not all is lost. If your preference is to play games that dwell in that dark place where the forces of evil are truly unbeatable, then have fun, but I'm very unlikely to join you at your tables. What about evil campaigns? Evil campaigns are a lot of fun. We get to play as monstrous people doing bad things. There is something very satisfying in getting the opportunity to be bad. When you're looking to run an evil campaign for yourself, you'll have an easier time if you lean into the cartoonishly evil rather than the morally dubious. Remember that both Team Rocket in Pokemon and Dr. Robotnik in Sonic are evil, but still very much family friendly. But those are for kids. What does a more mature evil campaign look like? I watched Dimension 20, Escape from the Bloodkeep recently. Those characters are evil, but we love them. Why is that? It's because their personal flaws, their deep personal flaws, in some cases, are about the character's desire for power and control and their petty ambitions. When Matt Mercer's character, Leland, decides to have a vendetta against Galfast Hamhead, the legally distinct Samwise Gamgee, it is not because she's a halfling, and definitely not a hobbit. It's because she has thwarted his plan at the scary volcano. The character hates one very specific halfling, not all of them. So this character can still be evil and do dreadful things, but it's indiscriminate violence, rather than aiming at a particular group. If you want to run an evil campaign, I'd recommend this approach rather than adding prejudice into what's going to be an already complex mix. What about orcs and ogres and oozes? Oh my. Right. Prejudice is unfounded, irrational suspicion and hatred. Lots of antagonists in RPGs were designed by the creators so that players can rationally beat up some baddies and not feel bad about it. Over the years, fans of worlds and authors have humanized and softened creatures which were once just monsters to become something more complex. What if not all drow are evil is how we got the Drizzt novels. You can even get cuddly gelatinous cubes now. They are objectively adorable. You should get me one for Christmas. As a rule of thumb, if they do people things, they're people, and you shouldn't kill them unthinkingly. If they do animal things, they're animals, and you also shouldn't kill them unthinkingly. Remember, a good definition of cruelty is needlessly causing harm. If the party encounters creatures that don't behave like humans or behave like animals, then have at it. Go to town killing skeletons and demons and monstrosities if you like, but maybe not all skeletons. See, it completely depends on your setting, at your table. Who run the world? Oh, girls, obviously. But if you're not a girl, it's still you. You decide what happens at your table. Not me, not Wizards of the Coast. And as long as you preface your game tales with "in my world" or "at my table," rather than "in the canonical Forgotten Realms," then we can all have a good time on the internet. Why is it difficult to play a prejudiced character? Hurting people, even imaginary ones, just isn't nice. One reason it's tougher to play a character who's prejudiced is because their views and actions will directly hurt others, and by nature of prejudice, disliking whole groups, they're going to be hurting innocents. Given that you've been watching someone in a rainbow t-shirt talk philosophically about prejudice for the last few minutes, I think I'm on pretty safe ground when I assume that you are, on balance, quite a nice person. You're not well practiced at being terrible, and being mean to people doesn't come naturally to you. This means that unless you're an actor, you've not really tried to upset people on a regular basis. However deeply immersed in our characters we are, everyone we play is still in some way us. and it's natural to worry that the folks that we're playing with won't be great at making a distinction between who our character is and who we are as a person. Look at Jack Gleeson, who played Joffrey Baratheon in Game of Thrones. He got hate mail from people who so despised his character, they took time out of their days to write horrible things to him. Unless you're running actual play like me on my other channel, which you should totally check out, your audience is going to be your friends around your table. But that makes it worse. These are your friends, people you care about and you value their opinion. This is yet another barrier to playing a flawed character, and that people-pleasing side of us may mean that we never take that risk at all, playing it safe with bland, flat characters. So how do we actually do it? How do we bring a flawed, prejudiced character to our tables? I've split this section into actionable tips for everyone, then player specifics, finally looking at guidance for GMs, which includes tips on world building as well as making individual characters. Also, I've made a summary document for this video with these tips front and center, which is a free download on the Renegade Rolls Patreon. You don't have to be a member to get it, but if you'd like to support me and this channel, I'd appreciate it. Tips that apply to everyone. I did a video a while back on the TTRPG hierarchy of needs. In order to reach those upper levels of transcendence, or even just to have a good time in general, you're going to need to do two things. You need to trust and love the other people around the table. If you prefer to sound corporate rather than all New Age spiritualist, you can call it a social contract, but it boils down to the same thing. It's about knowing that your fellow players are not their characters, and feeling confident enough in your relationship with them that you can call each other out if you've gone too far, without it bleeding over into resentment between you as people. That might be chatting out of character about the direction you're planning to go. This might be saying, hey, my character is probably going to confront yours soon. Just a heads up that it might be a bit heated in the moment. Professional actors struggle with playing evil characters. I'm not a professional actor. You're probably not a professional actor either. So it's completely okay to stop, pause for a second, use the X card or any other safety tools at the table. Take a minute outside of the character and check back in with yourself and your friends before continuing. There's a good line that's been added by the government to gambling adverts here in Scotland. When the fun stops, stop. And that advice holds true for us playing TTRPGs as well. Having a debrief after a particularly heated session is incredibly useful before you go your separate ways. It's a moment to decompress and to realise that your friend is still your friend and not the character that we were playing for the evening. Retconning is great. I do it all the time as GM, and players should totally have the power to say, hey, actually, can my character have said that instead? It doesn't break the game, and it can be used for all sorts of purposes, from, oh, I forgot, I have the skeleton key in the bag of holding. Can we retcon? To, yeah, I don't feel comfortable with what my character said there. Can we retcon? Allow it, normalise it, and everyone will have a better time. Finding the why. For a masterclass in finding the why, I'm going to refer to myself and my wonderful players. Here's a section from one of my actual play games. We were playing a Halloween Reverse Scooby-Doo game where the players were all ghosts, ghouls, and things that go bump in the night. Dominic was playing the ghost of the park manager, who was just too busy to pass on, and he set his sights on trying to spook the legally distinct Velma character that I had cleverly called Thelma.
I just have a personal vendetta against her, and without even trying to make any sort of decision about the future of the park, I just want to make this woman's life hell. I think it's just knowing that she actually is capable of outsmarting what it is that we're doing. You know,
smart women.
What have you got against intelligent women?
You just have to hate smart women. Say it for the Patreon exclusive.
Patreon. How do I make it justifiable for me to hate Thelma that doesn't make hectoring sense?
You can see he was clearly flustered with the sudden accusation, but did a great job of thinking on his feet to give a reason why his character would act this way. We did a quick check-in after this to make sure everyone, especially Dominic, felt okay with it. As GM, I felt this was just on the right side of where I felt comfortable. If I'd felt that we'd gone too far, I would have stepped in. Also, while funny, this was bad behaviour by the rest of my group. The trouble is, we all do improv comedy, and this sort of gifting is the sort of thing we'll do to each other all the time, out of mischief. If you want to practice finding the why, there's an improv game called Accusations, where you say outlandish things like, hey Rich, why do you believe that the moon is plotting to kill you? And the challenge for the other person is to defend themselves while owning the accusation. Well, I do, I really do. I see it out there. Never the same shape. It's changing all the time, but sometimes with a face. It's never blinking. Just those cold, staring, dead eyes of a killer. It's behind me, isn't it? Avoid making it their whole deal. Remember, most people think they're acting entirely logically, they're the heroes of their own story, and it can take a lot of effort to shake this worldview. I've spoken before in videos about how one-dimensional characters are dull. A totally single-minded character might be easier to roleplay. What's that thiefy McThief face? You want to steal from the merchant again? But it's gonna wear thin pretty quickly. This applies tenfold when it comes to portraying a prejudiced character. If that's all they've got to say for themselves, well, it's not going to be a good time for anyone. Instead, make sure that it isn't their whole deal. They can have other things about them. The most effective villains are the ones who are relatable 90% of the time, and then surprise us with a callous action. In screenwriting terms, this is often known by the shorthand of, metaphorically, kick the dog. We see a character acting reasonably, and then we see something that proves that they're a bad person. And that right there, while using kick the dog metaphorically, is the energy that you should be looking to bring to your flawed characters. There's another rule in screenwriting that says that any scene which doesn't progress the story in some way shouldn't be there. Gratuitous anything in media is likely to be a turn-off for me. It's where the point has been made, but they just keep on going, showing more examples of the bad thing. It doesn't aid anyone's understanding. You should bear this in mind when you're portraying a character who displays any sort of prejudice. Once you're sure folks around the table get it, there's no need to keep reminding them at every opportunity. You can revisit this behaviour in a few sessions if you find that others around the table have forgotten about it. If there's a scene which is yet another example of the scummy character being scummy, you can always draw a veil over it and move on to another scene. Lines and veils are one of many safety tools I highly recommend you look into if you're not using them already. I've linked below to a good article on the topic. Also, let me know if you'd like to see a standalone video dedicated just to safety tools. Guidance for players. If you're a player in a game where your group has agreed to explore prejudice and its ramifications, I've got 3 key pieces of advice to share. The goal of any player character in a long-term campaign is to grow and change. At least if you're playing with a narrative first rather than completionist or simulationist group. The differences between those kinds of play are something that causes so many arguments in the RPG community, and it's something I could easily spend a whole video discussing. But for today, we are looking at just narrative style games. For a slower burn exploration of character growth, here's James from DM with a Day Job.
Take, for example, my character Shul Bewolf that I'm playing in my friend's Pathfinder 2 campaign. He is a halfling, and he is racist against dwarves, because they chip the glasses, crack the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. That story has been passed down from hobbit to halfling to halfling to halfling. And now Shuld is racist against dwarves because he believes that they have no manners, that they cannot be trusted to behave in a normal manner. They are less than a halfling. And he meets Grishawn, another member of the party. And initially, he is willing to support Grishawn because Grishawn is functionally useful. He is a meat shield against all the other things that Shuld is facing. But eventually, Shuld is going to have to come face to face with the fact that as a paladin, or champion in the parlance of Pathfinder, his beliefs as a paladin, as a lawful goodish character, Pathfinder doesn't have lawful good, but in that kind of belief structure is incompatible with his racism. And that is going to progress from Grishawn is just this person that I keep around because they soak up some damage. They are somebody else on the front line. They are cannon fodder to, okay, you're really good in a fight, so you're one of the good ones. And eventually becoming friends with Grishawn and going, when he's unconscious and I have to use my lay on hands, realizing that I actually care about this person. And that's going to lead to some introspection for Shuld. And then what does that mean for everybody else? Initially, it's going to be, no, it's just Grishawn. But as I am exposed to other dwarves, realizing that I can no longer maintain this incongruity between what I believe should be the case in Shuld's religious beliefs and what I believe within my prejudices, these are incompatible. And it will force Shuld into a reckoning on who he is and how he's behaved. And he's going to have to come to grips with, I'm a jackass and I'm wrong.
It's easier to play a character whose predilections predominantly hurt themselves, the alcoholic, the kleptomaniac. Often they can elicit sympathy from other characters, especially when you find out the root cause of this behaviour. Something which James did well with his character is to show that progress gets slower as their outlook improves. It might not take long for a person to realise that shouting abuse at people different than them is a bad thing to do, but it might take them longer for their suspicions to relax completely. Pressuring fellow party members. If you're playing alongside a bigoted character, I hope that your character would have a word, just like I hope you'd be able to have a word with any bigots in your life. These moments can lead to fantastic, deep roleplay and can often be a catalyst for character change. But just as in the real world, the social costs of calling out bad behaviour can feel just too high. So have a think about whether your character would feel able to call their teammate out. I'd recommend a bit of a fourth wall break to share a little of your character's internal monologue as a way of making it clear that they feel uncomfortable with the situation, but are just choosing not to voice it. It's a good way of letting everyone around the table know that you're aware of the bad behaviour, but have an in-game reason for not confronting it. Seth Skorkowski made a video recently, which I've linked in the description, on closed and open role-playing. He shares some great wisdom there, including a section in there which was all about when to narrate in first person and when to narrate with a third person viewpoint. You can distance yourself from your character's actions, especially if they go against what you, the player, think, by moving away from a first person voice and into third person perspective. Instead of saying, "I've never trusted tieflings, once from the hells, always from the hells." Instead you could say, well, Hammer Hammerson, that's me, looks at the approaching tieflings and tells everyone loudly that he just doesn't trust them. It's a small difference, but can help make things a bit less intense if you know your group doesn't want to lean in too closely to this sort of roleplay all the time. GMs, you can use all the advice in the players section and apply it to your NPCs, but if you didn't already have enough on your plate, here are some more things for you to think about in your pre-game world building and at the table. You might feel that not all these suggestions suit you and your group, but that's okay. You'll find what works for your table. Show that there are systemic issues that inform personal behaviour. Ignoring people who are just thugs and want to hurt people, the route which leads to many people sharing prejudiced views is usually down to ignorance. If someone's been told that certain groups of people are out to get them, but they have no counter-narratives to give them an opposing viewpoint, they'll go along with the prevailing wisdom. This is likely to be most of the prejudiced folks you set up for your player characters to encounter. Often our fantasy worlds are large and people would likely not be exposed to other cultures in the way that we have access to in our world today, so that narrow outlook, that distrust of the other, while not right, is at least understandable. The other sort of person sharing prejudiced views is more insidious, where someone has access to the facts and knows that a prejudiced view is not the right thing to do, but they choose to be cruel regardless, sharing lies and disinformation. To drop the fantasy facade for a moment, in our world these groups are both readily apparent. Cold, calculating people have realised that it's in their interest to tell groups of people who have grievances, whether legitimate or not, and they feel left behind, that their enemies, the people who are making their lives worse, are the other, the outsider, the immigrant, the person who is somehow different to them because of religion, heritage, or sexuality. Yes, this is why you feel you're not getting ahead in life. That person there, they want to eat your only cookie, while they hoard a million more cookies than you can ever have access to. These people control mainstream media, social media, and increasing number of the political class. Sadly, there is no shortage of real-world inspiration you can bring to your games. It's going to be up to our heroes to see through the deception and defeat this true enemy. Demonstrate that society allows this sort of behaviour. You'll need to decide how entrenched you want prejudice to be in the societies that you present. Are there just a few bad apples, or does the rot go right to the core? I find these sorts of world-building questions fascinating. Can you have a good empire? How about an evil federation? Whatever you decide, you'll want to demonstrate what normal looks like for each locale. Are cities civilized and cosmopolitan while more rural areas are less welcoming? Or would urban areas in your world be closed off and only a chosen in-crowd allowed access? The choice on how much, how little, how isolated or how widespread prejudice runs in our worlds should be a major point of consideration when deciding the overall tone of your campaign. It's something I'd look to share with my players as early as possible in a campaign elevator pitch before anyone even commits to start playing. Give opportunities to confront or let your players stew. I mentioned in the section for players, they should be looking for chances to confront their fellow party members and call out bad in-character behaviour when they see it. As GM, you can do a lot to facilitate this. Give the questionable character opportunities to be bad, and then make sure you make time for quiet moments between combat or social encounters with NPCs for some one-to-one time between player characters. Less is more from a GM's perspective for this kind of thing. You can simply say, the two of you take the first watch together. What do you talk about as you watch the first stars come out over the campsite? Your players will hopefully go, "Haha, roleplay time, great," rather than, we talk about how the beans are getting boring for dinner every night. Depending on the length of your campaign, as a group you may want to let resentment between the PCs fester for a few sessions. If your group are up for it, let the characters stew in an uncomfortable dynamic. Again, not your players. If your players are uncomfortable, something's gone very wrong. Slugblaster, just here, does an incredible job of reveling in those uncomfortable moments and making them into a game mechanic. Each character has an arc, which it costs in-game currency in order to progress through, so the group are encouraged to spend time in the awkward moments of falling out and shouldn't be able to resolve things happily until they've spent a while in each phase of their story. This might feel prescriptive to some, but if your group are looking for some structure to their character stories, this game might be right up your street. If you want the full rundown, go watch the Quinn's Quest video on Slugblaster. It is absolutely brilliant stuff. I've linked it below. Present dilemmas, the lesser of two evils. If you really want to twist the knife, one of my favourite tools is to play the game of the lesser of two evils. Give the player characters choices which put them on the side of the prejudiced NPC while you fight a common foe. The NPC cleric is a massive xenophobe, but she's the only one who can turn undead and keep the skeletal forces from overwhelming the town. Will the characters take her up on the offer of assistance, or try and fight the unquiet spirits on their own? If you pitch it right, they'll take her up on the offer, and the characters, not the players, will hate every minute of it. That's a good short-term example, but there's a diabolical art form in stringing this out across many sessions, making it a theme of the campaign: moral greyness and compromise. Don't do this in a heroic heroes heroing heroically game of D&D or a My Little Pony game, but in something like Into the Odd or a D&D game where you've agreed to explore more nuanced characters, this dilemma of the lesser of two evils would fit right in. Let's review and see all of this together. First, I believe that we can have prejudice in our fantasy worlds, and if you watch this far, you probably agree. For me, it's okay to include prejudice in a player character, in NPCs, and societies as a whole, as long as it is handled sensitively, with trust, love, and in a way which respects everyone's safety. I expect a lot of people find it difficult to play prejudiced player characters because, quite frankly, it doesn't feel nice. We're not practiced at it, and we don't want to make things weird with our friends around the table. But if we can push past that, again with sensitivity, trust, and love, then yes, we can bring prejudiced characters to our games. These tips apply to everyone, players and the GM. We play with trust and love, always, even if saying it like that feels odd. If it doesn't feel okay, we stop, we take a break and check in with each other. We're not afraid to retcon and use it as much as needed. The consistency of the narrative is less important than our relationship with our friends. We find the why for prejudiced characters and make sure that they're not one-dimensional. Bigotry should never be someone's entire deal. We only include scenes depicting prejudice which actually add to the story. We're not gratuitous. For players, the goal of our characters is to grow. In my games, I want to see the PCs overcome their inner demons so they can take on bigger foes like dragons or billionaires. If we're playing in a group with another character who is prejudiced, we look for opportunities to confront them, or give in-world reasons why our characters might not be up to the task just now. If things are feeling a bit intense, we pull the camera back to a third-person viewpoint. It's my character does, rather than I do. For GMs, we distinguish between ignorance and true malevolence. We build worlds that make it clear just how prevalent prejudice is. It should be a major component in colouring the overall tone of our campaigns and shared with our players as soon as possible. We give opportunities for PCs to confront their comrades and the bigger injustices, but we choose our moments depending on the feeling at the table. We present dilemmas for the characters, finding ways of giving them tough choices with potentially no perfect outcome. A printer-friendly version of this screen, as well as a markdown version for all you Obsidian fans, is available as a free download on my Patreon. There's no need to sign up, but if you're feeling generous, I would appreciate the support. If we can do even some of the things I've listed here, then discussing prejudice at our D&D tables shouldn't be a taboo we steer clear from, but something we can address head on with confidence that we'll be able to tell deep, nuanced stories with our friends that can stay with us for a lifetime. I'd love to hear what you think about this. It's a big topic and I know I've not covered everything. If you're commenting, remember that if you've got nothing nice to say nothing. Also, a massive thank you to my actual play group, especially Dominic, for letting me use him as an example. Also to James at DM with a Day Job, Karl Makes Stuff, Misty Steps, Salty Nick and Laura for helping me bring this to you. Links below, go say hello to all of them. Thanks for spending your time with me here. We'll be back to probably lighter topics next time. Until then, here is a nice, cozy video review for Brindlewood Bay, a TTRPG about little old ladies solving crimes, with some eldritch horror thrown in. I'll see you next time.